The Royal York Hotel in downtown Toronto pulsed with energy on that fateful Friday evening. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the grand ballroom, where the city's elite mingled in a sea of designer gowns and tailored tuxedos. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and ambition. Conversations buzzing like a well-orchestrated symphony of power and influence. At the center of it all stood Ethan Carter, the man of the hour. His 6'2" frame cut an impressive figure in a bespoke Tom Ford tuxedo, his dark hair artfully tousled in a way that suggested both confidence and nonchalance. His piercing blue eyes scanned the room, a half-smile playing on his lips as he basked in the admiration of Toronto's most influential figures. Ethan's latest project, a billion-dollar waterfront development, had cemented his status as the undisputed king of real estate. The gala was ostensibly to celebrate the project's success, but everyone knew it was really about Ethan himself, a coronation of sorts for the man who had conquered the city's skyline. Isabella Chen, Ethan's assistant, stood by his side, her crimson Valentino gown a stark contrast to the sea of black tuxedos surrounding them. At 28, she was younger than most in the room, but her sharp intelligence and unwavering loyalty to Ethan had earned her a place at his right hand. She laughed at something he said, her hand resting on his arm a beat longer than necessary. The chemistry between them was palpable, though no one dared to comment. Not yet, anyway. As Ethan charmed potential investors and accepted congratulations, he couldn't help but feel a twinge of guilt. His wife, Sophia, was conspicuously absent. 7 months pregnant with their first child, she had been battling severe morning sickness and fatigue. He had suggested, perhaps too eagerly, that she stay home and rest. Now, surrounded by the glitterati of Toronto, a part of him wished she were here to share in his triumph. Just as Ethan was about to give his speech, a murmur rippled through the crowd. He turned to see what had captured everyone's attention, and his heart skipped a beat. Sophia had arrived. She stood in the entrance of the ballroom, a vision in emerald green. Her dark hair cascaded in loose waves over her shoulders, and her hand rested protectively on the swell of her belly. The Vera Wang gown she wore had been carefully altered to accommodate her changing body, and it emphasized her pregnancy in a way that was both elegant and undeniably sensual. As Sophia made her way through the crowd, whispers followed in her wake. "Isn't that Ethan's wife? She looks stunning. I heard they've been having problems." Sophia ignored them all, her gaze fixed on Ethan and Isabella. She had suspected something for weeks. Late-night meetings, cryptic texts, the way Isabella's eyes lingered on Ethan during office functions. Tonight, she would confront him. "Ethan," she said, her voice steady but carrying an edge. That made nearby guests turn their heads. He spun around, his smile faltering for a fraction of a second before he recovered. "Sophia, you made it," he said, his tone light but his eyes wary. "I thought you weren't feeling well." "I wasn't," she replied, her gaze flicking to Isabella, who shifted uncomfortably. "But I couldn't miss this. After all, it's not every day my husband is honored for his achievements." The tension in the air was thick enough to cut with a knife. Ethan's jaw tightened, but he forced a laugh. "You're right, this is a big night for us." Sophia stepped closer, her voice dropping to a whisper that only he and Isabella could hear. "And how much of this night belongs to her, Ethan? How much of us does she think she owns?" Isabella's face flushed, and she took a step back. Ethan's expression hardened, his eyes darting around the room to see if anyone had overheard. "Sophia, this isn't the time or place," he said, his voice low but firm. "You're being irrational. It's the hormones talking." The words stung more than Sophia cared to admit. She had expected denial, deflection, even anger, but not this patronizing dismissal. She felt the weight of 100 curious eyes on her, the whispers growing, louder. Her hands trembled, but she refused to let him see her break. "You're right," she said, her voice rising now, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "This isn't the time or place, but don't worry, Ethan. I'll find the right one. And when I do, you'll wish you'd been honest with me." With that, she turned on her heel and walked out of the ballroom, her head held high. The crowd parted for her, their murmurs fading into silence as the heavy doors swung shut behind her. In the lobby, she paused, leaning against a marble column. As she tried to steady her breathing, her hand moved to her belly, feeling the flutter of movement within. "It's okay, little one," she whispered. "We're going to be okay." Outside, the cold Toronto air hit her like a slap, but she welcomed it. She climbed into the waiting car, her heart pounding, and gave the driver her best friend Claire's address. As the car pulled away from the hotel, she allowed herself one moment of weakness. A single tear slipping down her cheek before she wiped it away fiercely. This wasn't the end, she told herself. It was the beginning of something new. The morning after the gala, Sophia woke to the insistent buzzing of her phone. She was curled up on Claire's couch, a throw blanket tangled around her legs, her mouth dry and her head pounding from a night of tearful confessions and shared bottles of sparkling water. Claire, ever the loyal friend, had listened without judgment, offering comfort and righteous indignation in equal measure. Sophia reached for her phone, squinting at the screen. Her heart sank as she saw the notifications flooding in. Missed calls from Ethan, messages from concerned friends, and worst of all, a string of news alerts. The top one made her stomach lurch. Carter's empire crumbles. Real estate mogul caught in cheating scandal. The article featured a grainy photo of her leaving the gala, her face a mask of determination. Sophia's hand trembled as she scrolled through the story, which was filled with anonymous sources and wild speculation. How had this happened so quickly? Claire emerged from the kitchen, 2 steaming mugs of tea in hand. Her curly red hair was piled haphazardly on top of her head, and her freckled face was creased with concern. "How are you feeling?" she asked, handing Sophia a mug. Sophia took a sip, the warmth of the tea a stark contrast to the cold dread spreading through her chest. "Like my whole life just imploded on the front page of the Toronto Star." Claire sat down beside her, peering at the phone screen. "Jesus, they work fast. Have you talked to Ethan?" Sophia shook her head. "I can't. Not yet. I don't even know what I'd say." As if on cue, her phone buzzed again. Ethan's name flashed on the screen. Sophia stared at it, her finger hovering over the answer button. Claire squeezed her shoulder. "You don't have to talk to him if you're not ready." Sophia took a deep breath and answered the call. "Sophia." Ethan's voice came through, strained and tired. "We need to talk." "There's nothing to talk about, Ethan," she replied, her voice steadier than she felt. "You made your choice." "This is ridiculous," he snapped, his tone shifting from conciliatory to defensive in an instant. "You're blowing this out of proportion. Do you have any idea what this is doing? To my reputation, to our reputation?" Sophia's grip tightened on the phone, anger flaring in her chest. "Your reputation. What about mine, Ethan? What about our child? Did you think about that when you were with her?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line. When Ethan spoke again, his tone was colder, more calculated. "If you're going to be difficult about this, Sophia, I'll have no choice but to protect myself. You're not thinking clearly." Before she could respond, the line went dead. Sophia stared at the phone, a sinking feeling in her stomach. With trembling fingers, she opened their shared banking app. Her heart pounded as she tried to access their accounts. The screen flashed with an error message. "Access denied." "What is it?" Claire asked, watching her closely. "He's locked me out," Sophia whispered, her voice trembling. "He's cut me off." Claire's eyes narrowed, a fire lighting in them. "That bastard." "Don't worry, Sophia. We'll figure this out. You're not alone." Sophia nodded, but the reality of her situation was sinking in. She was 7 months pregnant, unemployed, and now financially cut off from the life she had built with Ethan. The future she had imagined, the nursery they had planned, the life they were supposed to share, was crumbling around her. As the day wore on, the media frenzy intensified. Sophia's phone buzzed constantly with calls from reporters and messages from acquaintances hungry for gossip. She shut it off, unable to bear the onslaught. Claire fielded calls from her own phone, protecting Sophia from the worst of it. By evening, exhaustion had set in. Sophia lay on the couch, one hand on her belly, feeling the baby's movements. Despite everything, the flutter of life within her brought a small smile to her face. "We'll be okay," she whispered, as much to herself as to the baby. "We'll figure this out." Claire returned from a quick trip to Sophia's house, armed, with a suitcase of clothes and essentials. "I grabbed what I could," she said, setting the suitcase down. "And I called my cousin Rachel. She's a lawyer, specializes in family law. She wants to meet with you tomorrow." Sophia nodded, gratitude washing over her. "Thank you, Claire. I don't know what I'd do without you." Claire sat down, beside her, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. "That's what friends are for. And listen, Sophia, you're stronger than you know. This isn't the end. It's a new beginning." As Sophia drifted off to sleep that night, Claire's words echoed in her mind. A new beginning. It wasn't what she had planned, but maybe, just maybe, it could be something better. The next few weeks passed in a blur of legal meetings, doctor's appointments, and house hunting. Sophia, with Claire's unwavering support and Rachel's legal expertise, began to piece together a new life for herself and her unborn child. Rachel, a sharp-minded woman in her early 40s with a no-nonsense attitude, had taken on Sophia's case with a fierce determination. "We're going to make sure you and your baby are taken care of," she assured Sophia during their first meeting. "Ethan might think he holds all the cards, but he's in for a rude awakening." True to her word, Rachel worked tirelessly to secure Sophia's financial future. She filed for an emergency spousal support order, ensuring that Sophia had access to funds for her immediate needs. She also began building a case for the divorce, meticulously documenting Ethan's infidelity and financial manipulation. Meanwhile, Claire helped Sophia search for a new place to live. They spent weekends touring apartments, looking for something that could be a fresh start. It was during one of these searches that Sophia felt her first real glimmer of hope. The apartment was in a quiet neighborhood, far from the glitzy downtown condo she had shared with Ethan. It was smaller, with creaky hardwood floors and a tiny galley kitchen. But as Sophia stood in what would be the nursery, she felt a sense of peace wash over her. "This is it," she said softly, her hand resting on her belly. "This is home." Claire grinned, squeezing Sophia's shoulder. "It's perfect, a blank canvas for your new life." Over the next few weeks, Sophia threw herself into making the apartment a home. She painted the nursery a soft yellow, assembled furniture, and slowly began to rediscover herself in the process. Each decision, from the color of the curtains to the arrangement of the living room, was hers alone. It was terrifying and exhilarating in equal measure. As her due date approached, Sophia found herself thinking more and more about her future beyond motherhood. She had always been passionate about helping others, but her role as Ethan's wife had often relegated that passion to charity galas and silent auctions. Now, she saw an opportunity to make a real difference. The idea came to her one night, as she was sorting through a box of baby clothes Claire had brought over. Many of the items were gently used, donated by friends and family. Sophia thought about how lucky she was to have this support system, and how many other single mothers might not be so fortunate. The next morning, she called Claire, excitement bubbling in her voice. "I have an idea," she said. "What if we started a nonprofit? Something to help single mothers get back on their feet?" Claire was silent for a moment, then laughed. "I think that's brilliant. But are you sure you're ready for something like that? You're about to have a baby, Soph." Sophia smiled, rubbing her belly. "I know it's crazy, but I need this. I need to build something that's mine, something that can help others who are going through what I'm going through." And so, in between doctor's appointments and prenatal classes, Sophia began to lay the groundwork for what would become new horizons. She reached out to old contacts, researched grant opportunities, and started to build a network of volunteers and supporters. It was during this time that Sophia received an unexpected call from Isabella, Ethan's former assistant. Her heart raced as she answered the phone, unsure of what to expect. "Sophia," Isabella's voice was hesitant, almost fearful. I know you have no reason to want to talk to me, but I needed to tell you how sorry I am. For everything." Sophia was silent for a long moment, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. Finally, she spoke. "Why now, Isabella? Why reach out after all this time?" There was a shaky breath on the other end of the line. Because I realized I was just a pawn in his game. He used me, and I let him. But you're so strong. You stood up to him, and I admire that. If there's anything I can do to help you, testify in the divorce, provide evidence, I will. I owe you that much. Sophia's mind raced. Could she trust Isabella? But then she thought about new horizons, about second chances and new beginnings. Okay, she said slowly. I appreciate that, Isabella. I can't promise anything, but maybe we can meet and talk. As she hung up the phone, Sophia felt a strange mix of emotions. Anger and hurt were still there, but alongside them was a glimmer of something else. Hope, perhaps, or the beginnings of forgiveness, not just for Isabella, but for herself. That night, as Sophia lay in bed, her hand resting on her swollen belly, she felt a powerful kick from the baby. She smiled, a tear slipping down her cheek. We're going to be okay, little one, she whispered. Better than okay. We're going to build something amazing. Isabella Chen sat alone in her sleek downtown condo, the silence pressing down on her like a physical weight. The gala had been over a month ago, but the memory of Sophia's confrontation still haunted her. She had tried to convince herself that she wasn't to blame, that Ethan had pursued her, that she had been swept up in his charm and power. But the truth was harder to ignore with each passing day. She stared at her reflection in the floor-to-ceiling windows, barely recognizing the woman looking back at her. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, and her usually impeccable appearance was disheveled. The media had been relentless, her name plastered across tabloids and gossip sites. Homewrecker, Mistress, Gold Digger. The labels stung, each one a reminder of her role in destroying a family. Her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was Ethan, again. His texts had grown increasingly cold and infrequent, a far cry from the passionate messages they'd once exchanged. She left it unanswered, a bitter taste in her mouth. She felt used, discarded, and utterly alone. With a sigh, Isabella opened her laptop, unable to resist the urge to check the news. Another article about the scandal popped up, but it wasn't Ethan's face that caught her attention this time. It was Sophia's. The photo showed her outside a small cafe, her hand resting protectively on her pregnant belly. Despite everything, there was a quiet determination in her eyes that Isabella couldn't ignore. "What have I done?" she whispered to the empty room, the weight of her actions finally crashing down on her. The next morning, after a sleepless night filled with self-reflection, Isabella made a decision. She found Sophia's contact information through a mutual acquaintance and, with trembling fingers, composed a message. "Sophia, I know you have no reason to trust me, but I need to talk to you. I'm sorry for everything. If you're willing, I'd like to meet. No pressure. Isabella." She held her breath as she hit send, half expecting no reply. But to her surprise, Sophia responded within minutes. "Meet me at the Riverdale Park. East in an hour. Come alone." An hour later, Isabella found herself walking through the sprawling park, her heart pounding. She spotted Sophia sitting on a bench overlooking the city skyline, her profile silhouetted against the afternoon sun. As Isabella approached, she noticed the subtle changes in Sophia, the gentle swell of her belly, the tension in her shoulders, and the wariness in her eyes. "Thank you for meeting me," Isabella began, her voice shaky. "I know I don't deserve your time, but I needed to say this in person. I'm sorry, Sophia, for everything. I was selfish, and I hurt you, and I'll never forgive myself for that." Sophia studied her for a long moment before speaking. "Why now?" she asked, her voice carefully controlled. "Why reach out to me after all this time?" Isabella hesitated, then sighed. "Because I realized I was just a pawn in his game. He used me, and I let him. But you're strong. You stood up to him, and I admire that. If there's anything I can do to help you, testify in the divorce, provide evidence, I will. I owe you that much." Sophia's expression softened, but only slightly. "I don't know if I can trust you," she said. "But if you're serious about helping, I'll consider it. For now, Let's just take this one step at a time." As they talked, Isabella felt a weight lifting from her shoulders. It wasn't forgiveness, not yet, but it was a start. She shared details of her relationship with Ethan, the promises he'd made, the future he'd dangled in front of her. With each revelation, she saw a mix of pain and understanding flicker across Sophia's face. Before they parted ways, Isabella hesitated, then reached into her bag. "I have something for you," she said, pulling out a USB drive. "It's everything. Emails, text messages, photos. Use it however you need to." Sophia took the drive, her fingers brushing against Isabella's. "Thank you," she said softly. This helps." As Isabella watched Sophia walk away, she felt a glimmer of hope. She couldn't undo the pain she'd caused, but maybe, just maybe, she could help make things right. The courthouse loomed before Sophia, its imposing facade a stark reminder of the battle ahead. She took a deep breath, one hand resting on her now prominent baby bump, the other clutching a leather portfolio filled with documents. Beside her, Rachel stood tall and confident, a steadying presence in the storm. "You ready for this?" Rachel asked, her eyes scanning Sophia's face for any sign of doubt. Sophia nodded, squaring her shoulders. "As ready as I'll ever be." They made their way through security and up to the courtroom, the click of their heels echoing in the marble hallway. Outside the courtroom doors, Sophia caught sight of Ethan and his legal team. He looked different, the confident swagger replaced by a tense, almost haunted expression. Their eyes met for a brief moment, and Sophia felt a pang of something. Not quite regret, not quite pity. She pushed the feeling aside, focusing on the task at hand. Inside the courtroom, the air was thick with tension. Sophia sat at one table with Rachel, while Ethan and his lawyers occupied the other. As the judge entered and the proceedings began, Sophia found herself transported back to the night of the gala, to the moment when her world had shattered. Rachel's voice brought her back to the present. "Your Honor, my client, Mrs. Sophia Carter, has been the victim of not only infidelity but also financial abuse and manipulation." What followed was a meticulous presentation of evidence. Rachel laid out a timeline of Ethan's affair, backed up by the evidence Isabella had provided. She detailed how Ethan had systematically isolated Sophia, cutting her off from their joint accounts and attempting to leave her penniless. Ethan's lawyers fought back hard, painting Sophia as a gold digger who was using her pregnancy to extort money from their client. But Rachel was prepared. She presented character witnesses, friends, colleagues, even some of Ethan's business associates, who testified to Sophia's integrity and Ethan's pattern of manipulative behavior. The turning point came when Isabella took the stand. Her testimony, delivered with a mix of remorse and determination, left no doubt about Ethan's actions and intentions. Sophia watched as Ethan's face paled, his carefully constructed defenses crumbling. As the days of the trial stretched on, Sophia found an inner strength she didn't know she possessed. Each time she took the stand, each time she faced Ethan across the courtroom, she stood a little taller, spoke a little more confidently. This wasn't just about money or revenge. It was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her future. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the judge delivered the verdict. Sophia was awarded a significant settlement, including the house they had shared and full custody of their unborn child. Ethan was ordered to pay child support and alimony, his empire now significantly diminished. As Sophia walked out of the courtroom, she felt a mix of emotions washing over her. Relief, certainly. A touch of sadness for the life she had lost. But overwhelmingly, she felt hope. She had faced her greatest challenge and come out stronger. Claire was waiting outside, enveloping Sophia in a fierce hug. "You did it," she whispered. "I'm so proud of you." Sophia nodded, tears pricking at her eyes. "We did it," she corrected, including Rachel and even Isabella in her glance. "All of us." As they left the courthouse, Sophia caught sight of Ethan one last time. He stood alone, looking lost and defeated. For a moment, their eyes met, and Sophia saw a flicker of the man she had once loved. But then, the moment passed, and she turned away, ready to embrace her new beginning. The first cry pierced the air of the delivery room, a sound so primal and perfect that it brought tears to Sophia's eyes. After hours of labor, her daughter, Emma Grace Carter, had finally arrived. "She's beautiful," Claire whispered, squeezing Sophia's hand as the nurses cleaned and weighed the baby. "She looks just like you." Sophia could only nod, overcome with emotion as her daughter was placed in her arms. Emma was tiny, with a tuft of dark hair and eyes that seemed to hold all the wisdom in the world. In that moment, all the pain and struggle of the past months faded away, replaced by an overwhelming love. The next few weeks were a blur of sleepless nights, diaper changes, and moments of pure joy. Sophia threw herself into motherhood, finding a strength and patience she never knew she possessed. Emma became her world, the center around which everything else revolved. But as the fog of new motherhood began to lift, Sophia found herself thinking more and more about new horizons. The non-profit she had dreamed up during her pregnancy had taken a back seat to the immediate needs of caring for Emma, but the passion to help other single mothers hadn't faded. One afternoon, as Emma napped, Sophia called Claire. "I think it's time," she said, her voice filled with a mixture of excitement and nervousness. "I want to get New Horizons off the ground." Claire's enthusiasm was palpable even through the phone. "I was hoping you'd say that. I've been doing some research, and I think I've found the perfect space for us to use as an office. It's small, but it's a start." Over the next few months, Sophia threw herself into bringing New Horizons to life. She worked during Emma's nap times and late into the night, drafting proposals, reaching out to potential donors, and building a network of volunteers. The work was exhausting but exhilarating, giving her a sense of purpose beyond motherhood. New Horizons. Mission was simple but powerful, to provide support, resources, and community for single mothers. They offered everything from job training and financial literacy classes to childcare assistance and emotional support groups. Sophia's own experiences informed every aspect of the organization, ensuring that they addressed the real, often overlooked needs of women in similar situations. As word of New Horizons spread, Sophia was surprised to find support coming from unexpected places. Former business associates of Ethan's reached out, impressed by her resilience and vision. Even some of the society women who had once whispered behind her back now offered their assistance, whether through donations or volunteer work. One evening, as Sophia was locking up the small office they had rented, she received a text from an unknown number. Her heart skipped a beat as she read the message. "Sophia, I know I don't deserve it, but I'd like to be part of Emma's life, even if it's just supervised visits. I want to do better. For her. For you. Ethan." Sophia stared at the screen, a whirlwind of emotions coursing through her. Part of her wanted to delete the message, to shut Ethan out of their lives completely. But another part, the part that remembered the man she had once loved, hesitated. After a long moment, she replied, "We can discuss it, but you need to prove that you've changed. Emma deserves nothing but the best." As she drove home, Sophia felt a strange mix of apprehension and hope. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long time, she felt truly in control of her life. She had Emma, she had New Horizons, and she had a strength she never knew she possessed. Pulling into her driveway, Sophia smiled as she thought about the day's achievements. A new partnership for New Horizons, Emma's first attempts at crawling, and now, possibly, a chance at redemption for Ethan. It wasn't the life she had planned, but it was a life filled with purpose, love, and the promise of better days ahead. The park was bustling with activity on a warm Saturday afternoon. Children's laughter filled the air, mingling with the cheerful barks of dogs and the distant strains of a street musician's guitar. Sophia sat on a bench, her eyes fixed on the playground where Emma, now a lively toddler of 2, was attempting to climb a small slide. Beside her sat Ethan, his posture tense, eyes darting between Emma and Sophia. These supervised visits had become a regular occurrence over the past year, a tentative bridge being rebuilt between father and daughter. "She's getting so big," Ethan said softly, a note of wonder in his voice. She looks more like you. Every day. Sophia nodded, a small smile playing on her lips. She's got your determination, though. Look at her tackle that slide. They watched in companionable silence as Emma finally reached the top of the slide, her face lighting up with triumph before she zoomed down with a squeal of delight. Sophia, Ethan began, his voice hesitant. I've been thinking, I want to do more, not just for Emma, but for you, for New Horizons. Sophia turned to him, surprise evident on her face. What do you mean? Ethan took a deep breath. I've been following the work you've been doing with New Horizons. It's incredible, Sophia. You've built something amazing, something that's really making a difference. Thank you, Sophia said cautiously, unsure where this was going. I want to help, Ethan continued. I've been volunteering at a shelter for the past few months, trying to understand what these women go through, and I realized I have resources, connections. I could do so much more. Sophia studied him, searching for any hint of ulterior motives, but all she saw was sincerity and perhaps a touch of desperation. Why now, Ethan? What's changed? He sighed, running a hand through his hair, a gesture so familiar it made Sophia's heart ache. I've had a lot of time to think. I messed up, Sophia. I hurt you, and I hurt Emma. I can't change the past, but I can try to be better. For her, for you, for all the families out there who need help. Sophia nodded slowly, her mind racing. All right, she said finally, but this isn't a free pass, Ethan. You have to prove yourself, not just to me, but to everyone you've hurt. I know, he said, his voice steady. And I will. I promise. Over the next few months, Ethan threw himself into his work with New Horizons. He used his business acumen to streamline operations and his network to secure funding. Sophia watched as he transformed, his former arrogance replaced by humility, his selfishness by a genuine desire to help. One evening, after a particularly successful fundraiser, Ethan approached Sophia. I wanted to give you this, he said, handing her an envelope. Inside was a check for a substantial amount, made out to New Horizons. Sophia's eyes widened. Ethan, this is incredible. Thank you. He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. It's the least I can do. You've built something amazing here, Sophia. I'm just glad I can be a part of it. As she watched him walk away, Sophia felt a warmth in her chest. It wasn't love, not anymore, but it was something. Respect, perhaps, and the beginnings of forgiveness. The conference room of New Horizons was abuzz with nervous energy. Sophia stood at the head of the table, her hands shaking slightly as she addressed her team. I just got off the phone with the Fairfield Foundation, she said, her voice tight. They're pulling their funding. A collective gasp went around the room. The Fairfield Foundation had been their largest donor, providing nearly a third of New Horizons' operating budget. Losing them could be catastrophic. Claire, who had become New Horizons' program director, was the first to speak. Why? Did they give a reason? Sophia nodded grimly. Budget cuts on their end. They're scaling back all their charitable contributions. The room erupted into worried chatter. How would they cover their expenses? What about the new shelter they were planning to open? Would they have to cut staff? Ethan, who had been quietly listening from the corner, stepped forward. We'll figure this out, he said, his voice firm. I'll reach out to my contacts. We'll find the funding. Sophia nodded, grateful for his support. Okay, everyone. Let's not panic. We need to come up with a plan. Claire, can you review our budget and see where we can cut costs without affecting our core services? Ethan, start reaching out to potential donors. I'll work on grant applications. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of activity. Sophia worked tirelessly, often late into the night after Emma had gone to bed. She pored over financial reports, drafted impassioned pleas to potential donors, and brainstormed new fundraising ideas. Ethan was true to his word, leveraging every connection he had. He organized a charity gala, convincing his old business associates to attend and donate. He even liquidated some of his personal assets, pouring the money into New Horizons. Their efforts began to pay off. Small donations trickled in, then larger ones. A local tech company offered to provide free IT support. A law firm volunteered. Pro bono services for New Horizons clients, but it wasn't enough. As the deadline to renew their lease on the shelter approached, they were still short of their goal. The night before the deadline, Sophia sat in her office, staring at the budget spreadsheet on her computer. The numbers blurred before her eyes, exhaustion and stress taking their toll. A soft knock on the door made her look up. Ethan stood in the doorway, holding 2 cups of coffee. "Thought you could use this," he said, setting 1 cup on her desk. Sophia smiled gratefully. "Thanks. Any luck with the Morgan Foundation?" Ethan shook his head. "Not yet, but I'm not giving up." They worked in companionable silence for a while, both acutely aware of the ticking clock. As midnight approached, Sophia's phone rang. She answered it, her heart pounding. "Miss Carter, this is Thomas Reed from the Morgan Foundation. I apologize for the late call, but I wanted to inform you personally. We've reviewed your proposal and we'd like to offer New Horizons a 2-year grant." Sophia's hand flew to her mouth, tears springing to her eyes. "Mr. Reed, thank you. Thank you so much." As she hung up the phone, she looked at Ethan, who was watching her with hopeful eyes. "We did it," she whispered. "The Morgan Foundation came through. We're going to be okay." Ethan's face broke into a wide grin. Without thinking, he pulled Sophia into a hug. For a moment, they stood there, the familiar warmth of each other's arms a reminder of what they had once been. Sophia pulled away first, wiping her eyes. "We should celebrate," she said, and her voice slightly shaky. Ethan nodded, his expression softening. "How about breakfast? I know a great place that opens early. We could take Emma, make it a family thing." Sophia hesitated for a moment, then smiled. "That sounds nice. A family thing." As they left the office, both felt a shift in their relationship. They weren't back together, and perhaps they never would be, but they were partners in this venture, co-parents to Emma, and maybe, just maybe, friends. 5 years had passed since the night of the gala that had changed everything. New Horizons had grown beyond Sophia's wildest dreams, with branches in every major city in Canada. The organization had become a beacon of hope for single mothers across the country, offering support, resources, and a chance at a better life. Sophia stood on the stage at their annual fundraiser, her heart swelling with pride as she addressed the crowd. Emma, now a vibrant 7-year-old, sat in the front row, her eyes shining with admiration for her mother. 5 years ago, a New Horizons was just an idea born out of my own struggles, Sophia began. Today, we've helped thousands of women and children build new lives. None of this would have been possible without the support of our donors, our volunteers, and our incredible staff. Her eyes found Ethan in the crowd. He gave her a small nod, a gesture of support and shared pride. Their relationship had evolved over the years into a strong co-parenting partnership and a solid friendship. While the romantic love they once shared was gone, it had been replaced by a deep mutual respect and a shared commitment to their daughter and to New Horizons. As Sophia finished her speech to thunderous applause, she felt a sense of completion. The journey hadn't been easy, but every struggle had led her to this moment. Later that evening, as the event wound down, Sophia found herself standing on the balcony, looking out over the city lights. Ethan joined her, handing her a glass of champagne. "Quite a night," he said, clinking his glass against hers. "You should be proud, Sophia. What you've built here, it's extraordinary." Sophia smiled, taking a sip of champagne. "What we've built, Ethan, I couldn't have done this without you." They stood in comfortable silence for a moment, both reflecting on the long road that had brought them to this point. "Do you ever wonder," Ethan began hesitantly, "what would have happened if things had been different?" Sophia considered the question. "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I look at Emma, at New Horizons, at the life we've built, and I wouldn't change a thing." Ethan nodded, understanding in his eyes. "You're right. We're exactly where we're meant to be." As they rejoined the party, Sophia felt a sense of peace she hadn't known in years. The future stretched out before her, full of possibility and hope. She had faced her greatest challenges and emerged stronger, wiser, and more fulfilled than she ever thought possible. This was her new chapter, and she was ready to embrace every page of it. What did you think of the story? Leave a comment and rate this story from 0 to 10. What rating would you give it and why? 2 buttons will appear next to it. One to subscribe, if you haven't already, and the other to watch other interesting stories. Choose one. Thanks for watching this far. See you soon.